The Hollywood producer Harvey Weinstein is found guilty of 2 counts of sexual assault. He was convicted of sexual assault and third-degree rape, but was cleared of 3 of the 5 charges he was facing. Also on the programme, fears of a global pandemic as the coronavirus continues to spread around the world. More than 30 countries are now affected, with Afghanistan, Bahrain and Iraq the latest to confirm new cases.
We must focus on containment while doing everything we can to prepare for a potential pandemic.
Well, within the last 15 minutes, a jury in New York has found the movie producer Harvey Weinstein guilty of sexual assault and third-degree rape. But it's cleared him of other charges, including one of predatory sexual assault, which could have led him to facing life in prison. These are pictures of him arriving at a court in New York earlier on Monday. The jury had been deliberating for several days, but took only around 2 hours to finalise its verdict today. Now, of course, this case has made headlines around the world for a few years now and kick-started the Me Too movement, both in America and, in fact, worldwide. Since 2017, more than 80 women have accused the former movie producer Weinstein of sexual misconduct, provoking and fueling that Me Too movement. Now, before all this happened, Harvey Weinstein had been one of Hollywood's most powerful producers. In fact, he had enjoyed that position of privilege for decades, making well-known films including The English Patient and Shakespeare in Love. Throughout the trial and before, he denied all the allegations and said that any sexual encounters with the women involved were all consensual. Well, these are live pictures of the courthouse in New York. As I said, this trial has been going on now for a good while, and the jury were deliberating for a few days. The verdict does, in some ways, some would argue, offer some measure of justice for the women who came forward with these allegations against Mr. Weinstein. The complaints about Mr. Weinstein did very much open the floodgate, so to speak, in late 2017 when the first accusations came out. Hundreds of thousands of women since then have aired their own stories of harassment. Mr. Weinstein in many ways became what you could describe as a symbol, not just of the Me Too movement, but also the culture in Hollywood. Some called it the casting couch culture in Hollywood, where many women alleged to have endured harassment from powerful men within the industry. So just to reiterate what has been happening over the last few minutes, the jury in New York has found the movie producer Harvey Weinstein guilty of sexual assault and third-degree rape. But importantly, he's been cleared of other charges, including one charge of predatory sexual assault. That was the really serious charge which could have led him to face life in prison. Well, our correspondent Ben Wright is in New York, outside that courtroom.
Harvey Weinstein has been found not guilty of predatory sexual assault. That was the most serious accusation, the charge that could potentially carry the heftiest prison sentence, potentially life imprisonment. Now, for the jury to find Harvey Weinstein guilty of predatory sexual assault, they had to tie in the evidence of a third woman who gave evidence at this trial, the actress Annabella Sciorri, who appeared in The Sopranos. She says that Harvey Weinstein raped her back in the mid-90s. Now, that case was too old, or that evidence was too old to submit on its own as a charge in this trial, but her evidence did feed into it. And if the jury had believed her testimony and also the testimony of either Miriam Haley or Jessica Mann, then he could have been convicted on a charge of predatory sexual assault. He has not been found guilty of predatory sexual assault, but he has been found guilty of a criminal sex act in the first degree. That relates to Miriam Haley, a former production assistant who said that Harvey Weinstein sexually assaulted her in 2006 in his apartment here in New York. He's also been found guilty of rape in the third degree. Rape in the third degree, and that relates to Jessica Mann, a former actress who testified that Harvey Weinstein raped her in 2013 in a New York hotel.
So Ben, what does this mean? I mean, obviously it's very early to say this, but what does this mean in terms of potential prison sentences, if at all? Because obviously the predatory sexual assault accusations were the most serious of all.
They carried a potential life sentence, but look, I'm going to have to check. But I think being found guilty of a sex act in the first degree will carry a potentially heavy prison sentence, and guilty of rape in the third degree, an incredibly serious charge to be accused of and found guilty of, will also incur a prison sentence. I think that is absolutely undeniable. Harvey Weinstein, former Hollywood mogul, huge figure on the red carpet for so many years, is now looking, I'm pretty certain to say, at a very large number of years behind bars. This isn't the end. He faces 2 criminal charges in California as well. I think there are some civil cases. This is a very big deal, clearly, for Harvey Weinstein, whose career was already shredded after this. He now faces a very heavy custodial sentence after the jury has found him guilty on those 2 counts.
Well, let's bring you up to date with what we do know about the latest on this case. The jury has reached a verdict in the trial of the former Hollywood movie mogul Harvey Weinstein. He's been convicted at his sexual assault trial. He was found guilty of sexual assault and third degree. The problem here, of course, is that he was actually originally convicted of 5 different counts. So of predatory sexual assault and also the lesser counts as well. What we know so far is that he's been acquitted of the most serious charge against him. So he's been convicted on the lesser charges of third-degree rape and a criminal sexual act in the first degree. But the 67-year-old former movie mogul, we can't see him here in these pictures, which are coming to us live from the New York courthouse. You can see it's about 7 minutes past midday New York time. We can't see him here, but we do know that the 67-year-old has been convicted of third-degree rape and criminal sexual act in the first degree, but acquitted of the most serious charges against him of predatory sexual assault and first-degree rape. He does still, however, face charges in Los Angeles of rape and sexual assault of 2 women in 2013. These are pictures of him, I believe, from a little bit earlier on in the trial. More than 80 women, including former actresses, had accused him of sexual misconduct, and these accusations stretch back absolute decades. Now, had he been convicted of that predatory sexual assault charge, which, as I said, he hasn't been, he was looking at a potential life sentence. So that basically means that he's not looking at a potential life sentence right now. The jury was made up of 7 men and 5 women, and they had had about 5 days of deliberations during the trial, during which, as our correspondent Ben told me a little bit earlier, Harvey Weinstein himself refused to testify. He didn't testify. However, his defense lawyer, Donna Rotuno, who was described as pugnacious by our correspondent Ben Wright in New York, argued in the trial that he, after all, was the victim of an overzealous prosecution. She also accused the prosecutors of themselves acting like movie makers, inventing an alternative world in which women are not responsible for their own behaviour. And Mr. Weinstein himself was criticised for, as you can see in these pictures, coming to court on a daily basis, pushing a Zimmer frame. Now, there had been talk that he had had a car accident, but some people accusing him of trying to garner people to feel sorry for him, to pity him by pushing that Zimmer frame. So just to reiterate what we do know so far, the former movie producer has been found guilty of 2 counts in his sexual assault trial, the lesser charge of third-degree rape and a criminal sexual act in the first degree. Now, this could mean that he will be jailed. We don't know what this means exactly in terms of sentencing. I'm not a law expert, but I can tell you that law experts had been saying beforehand that had he been found guilty of the most serious charge against him, that's predatory sexual assault and first-degree rape, then he would have been facing a life sentence. He no longer is facing that right now. Now, what we know is that earlier on, Harvey Weinstein entered the court wearing a navy blue suit and leaning on that Zimmer frame, that walking frame. It's important to give you a bit of background to this case as well, because this is not just about one man and the accusations against him. Harvey Weinstein and what happened to him really kick-started the Me Too movement. He was the centre of the Me Too movement, which inspired many women to go public with misconduct allegations against powerful men. So it wasn't just against him, it was also brought out a lot of accusations against other powerful men and brought about the birth of this huge movement which centred on women's rights to work and not be harassed by men. Before all this happened, Harvey Weinstein was, quite frankly, one of the biggest names in the Hollywood movie-making industry. In fact, a number of films that he worked on which made his name, including, for example, films such as the Quentin Tarantino film Pulp Fiction, The English Patient, and Shakespeare in Love. These were all Oscar-winning productions. So Harvey Weinstein was a huge personality and extremely powerful in the world of Hollywood. The jury, which was made up of 7 men and 5 women, took 5 days to find him guilty. And during the trial, Harvey Weinstein himself refused to testify. The trial began on the 6th of January 2020, and he refused to testify. But what his team did do was they tried to get the trial moved out of New York. They argued that being in New York would mean intense media scrutiny and would make it much, much harder for Harvey Weinstein to get a free trial. Of course, what we don't know is whether or not he will actually get a custodial sentence. It's looking likely, but we're just not sure exactly what the judge is going to say. And of course, it's very important to point out that there are other accusations that have been brought forward against Harvey Weinstein pertaining to claims made about him, historical claims from 2013, which are currently in Los Angeles. So just to give you a bit of background as to what's been going on over the last few days, everyone has been waiting for the jury to come out with its verdict. They've been deliberating since Tuesday, the 18th of February, and they've been reviewing all different parts of testimony, including emails, texts, and other parts of testimony between Harvey Weinstein and his accusers. So just to update you one last time on what we do know so far, we do know that Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of 2 counts of sexual assault. So he's been convicted on lesser charges of third-degree rape and a criminal sexual act in the first degree, but he's been acquitted of the most serious charge. We are trying to talk to somebody on the phone in the next few minutes about this. We are seeing quite a bit of movement now happening in that courthouse as people exit the courthouse. The trial has been going on, as I mentioned, since January, since the 6th of January, in fact, and it's been over the last 5 days that the jury has been deliberating. And as you can see, many people now exiting the courthouse. We might end up seeing Harvey Weinstein coming out there at some point. I'm not entirely sure, but what we can tell you is that more than 80 women, including some pretty famous actresses, accused him of sexual misconduct. And these accusations stretched back many, many decades. So these are historical accusations that have been levied at the former movie mogul Harvey Weinstein, which have now been coming forward. These women have been coming forward over the last few years, since about the end of 2017, when the first accusations were levelled at him. And since then, of course, he has lost his reputation as a top movie mogul. He has also lost his marriage. His marriage broke down, and he is now obviously a man who has been convicted. Let's speak now to criminal defence attorney and former prosecutor Julie Rendelman. Julie, I've been trying to make sense here of the legal framework, but can you just tell us exactly what this means now, the fact that Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of these two lesser counts, but not guilty of the more serious charge?
Sure. So the top two counts were predatory sex assault. That required the jury to believe in one of the counts, Mimi Haley and Annabella Sciorra. And the second predatory count required them to believe the second victim and Annabella Sciorra. What the jury came back with is they didn't obviously believe Annabella Sciorra beyond a reasonable doubt, but they did believe Mimi Haley. And so they found him guilty of criminal sexual assault in the first degree as to Mimi Haley, which carries a maximum of up to 25 years. And they also found him guilty as to the second victim, that would be Jessica Mann, of rape in the third degree, which is a lesser count than the rape in the first degree. And with that, he can get a maximum of 4 years, which is an incredible victory for the prosecution, who had an uphill battle when it came to bringing this case against Mr. Weinstein.
So when you say 25 years and 4 years, that's the potential, the maximum that he can be sentenced, but doesn't necessarily mean that he will get that long. Am I correct?
You are absolutely right. So for the criminal sexual assault, the minimum is 5 years and the maximum is 25 years. And for the rape, it's, I believe, 1.5 to 4 years. And the judge can also give him, if the judge chooses to, consecutive time. So he can give time on one and then add time for the other complainant.
So talk me through the actual trial, because what I don't understand is, why did Harvey Weinstein decide not to testify? I mean, is that unusual in these kind of cases or quite common?
No, I think, look, I mean, most attorneys out there, especially criminal defense attorneys, would tell anyone that over my dead body would I have allowed Harvey Weinstein to get on the stand, for several reasons. One, because Harvey Weinstein is not very likable. And so as we've seen in the past when he's tried to defend himself, it has always made quite a mess of his defense strategy. So that's the first big issue. The second issue is that the defense felt they had a strong case. The defense felt that they would be able to poke holes enough in each of the complainant's stories such that they didn't need him to testify. And the burden is on the prosecution to prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, and their position was he didn't, and therefore he shouldn't testify.
And of course, the prosecution has been accused by his defense lawyer, Donna Rotunno, of actually having an overzealous prosecution. What do they mean by overzealous prosecution? Surely when you prosecute someone, you want to be quite zealous about it.
That's a good, yes. I mean, prosecutors are supposed to be overly zealous. Look, this is a very, very unique case. Since the Me Too movement came about, we hadn't seen many cases in which an individual had had a relationship with another person, what they called their predator, and continued that relationship and were able to successfully bring charges. So this is a fairly novel case, and I think what's big about this victory is what it means for potential other alleged victims of this type of sex abuse. And I think we've learned, and we're learning, that rape comes in many different shapes and sizes. Rape victims come in different shapes and sizes, and their experiences are different. And so a prosecutor needs to understand, and understand that not every rape victim is the same in terms of personality and the way they handle things.
Okay, Julie Rendelman, criminal defense lawyer, thank you for joining us. I might ask you to stay with us just for a few more moments, because I want to bring in our correspondent Ben Wright, who is in New York for us. And Ben, I want to talk to you because I've been looking at the wires and they've told me that he is going to be held in custody and is cuffed in court. That's according to the latest wires that we have here in the London studio.
Well, that would obviously follow from the convictions that the jury has passed here. I mean, these are very serious crimes that Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of. Guilty of a criminal sex act in the first degree. That relates to the accusations from Miriam Haley, and guilty of rape in the third degree. That is based on the testimony of Jessica Mann. I read somewhere this morning that Harvey Weinstein actually had breakfast this morning at the Four Seasons Hotel in New York, came in here again on his sort of walker frame as he's done every morning. He will not have known which way this was going to go. I think we know that the jury was, I think, taking its time, certainly, and had lots of questions for the judge, wanting to clarify exactly how this charge sheet should be understood and how the various charges interacted with each other. They looked for more clarification on Friday. So they spent 5 days thinking about what they would do. In the end, they have not found Harvey Weinstein guilty of predatory sexual assault, which would also have brought in the testimony of Annabella Sciorra, an actress who said that she was raped by Harvey Weinstein in the mid-90s. They needed to tie her evidence with one of the first-degree sexual offences together to find a conviction on predatory sexual assault. Instead, though, they have looked at the testimony, the often tearful and very traumatic testimony given by those two main accusers, Miriam Haley and Jessica Mann, and have found him guilty. As I said, criminal sex act in the first degree, found guilty, and rape in the third degree as well. And these are convictions that will carry custodial sentences. We don't know at the moment what he's going to get, but it could be up to 25 years in prison.
Absolutely, yes. Just the criminal defence lawyer that I was just speaking to a second ago said that one of the charges that he's been found guilty of, it's a minimum 5 years, maximum 25, and the second charge is a maximum 4 years for the lesser charges. So that could end up being, a pretty hefty amount of time in jail for a man who incredibly once was one of the most powerful men in Hollywood, Ben.
It's hard to overstate the degree with which Harvey Weinstein was absolutely at the centre of the movie industry for so many years. You know, the producer behind films like Shakespeare in Love and Pulp Fiction, The King's Speech. I mean, you know, if you wanted to get a big movie done, it was highly likely that Harvey Weinstein would have been at the centre of it. You know, on the red carpet for years, a feted movie mogul who people depended upon for their careers. He made and broke the careers of the actors and the producers that he worked with. These two women, Miriam Haley was an assistant producer in the film industry, Jessica Mann, an aspiring actress, and you know, the fall that Harvey Weinstein has seen happen to him has just been precipitous. He's been a pariah, I think, now for quite a long time, and of course, since the allegations against him first came out in October 2017, published in the New York Times, that opened the floodgates to a whole string of accusations by women who had worked with him, come across him over the years, who said that he sexually harassed them as well. And he spawned the Me Too movement, which of course has, you know, changed the way that workplaces around the world think about sexual harassment, the behavior of men, appropriate sexual behavior. But this was the first time that Harvey Weinstein himself had found himself in court battling accusations that he'd always denied, and he has been found guilty and he's going to prison.
Ben Wright, thank you very much indeed. Ben there outside the courtroom in New York. Well, let's bring in now the author and feminist Naomi Wolf, who joins us on the phone now. Naomi, first of all, your reaction to the news that Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of some of the charges against him.
I'm relieved. I think it's an important day for survivors of sexual abuse and assault. I think it's an important statement by the criminal justice system in New York that you can't rape women in New York with impunity. And while I noticed that a lot of headlines are stressing that he wasn't convicted of all charges, the fact that so few rapists are ever convicted, fewer than 12% of rape trials end in convictions in the U.S., and it's fewer than 6% in the UK. It's a very important statement by this jury that the days of impunity, at least for this perpetrator, are over.
And yet he wasn't found guilty of the more serious charges. Do you think that's important? Does that matter?
Well, I'd really like to caution you. A lot of headlines, as I mentioned, are spinning that, and that's really a misreading of what's important in this conviction. Rape is a very serious charge. What he wasn't found guilty of was a charge that would have necessitated
harmonizing two different cases. And so it is a big deal that he was found guilty of rape.
Okay, Naomi, I'm so sorry. I'm going to have to stop you right there, making that important point. Let's take you live to New York, and the district attorney is making a statement.
I want to thank the jurors for their service and careful attention. Their verdict turned the page in our justice system on men like Harvey Weinstein. I want to say thank you to the assistant district attorneys, paralegals, and analysts who worked on this case, including Maxine Rosenthal, Kevin Wilson, Shannon Goldberg, Carrie Dunn, John Irwin, Alyssa Marino, Andy Clark, Danny Mejia Cruz, Stephanie Littell, and Emily Hogan, and especially to Harriet Galvin, Megan Hast, and Jonah Luzzi Orban, who conducted a terribly difficult and meticulous investigation and performed masterly a trial under the brightest of spotlights. And finally, to the survivors of Harvey Weinstein, I owe, and we all owe, an immense debt to you, who had the courage beyond measure to speak your story to the world, to this courtroom, at great personal risk and in great personal pain. To those of us who were privileged to be in the courtroom when they testified, you know what I mean. These survivors weren't just brave, they were heroic. Words can't describe adequately the sacrifices the survivors made to pursue justice. Weinstein, with his manipulation, his resources,
District Attorney
his
from New York City,
attorneys,
Cyrus
his
R.
publicists,
Vance
and his
Jr., the Manhattan District Attorney, making a statement there, talking about the victims, the survivors of Harvey Weinstein's crimes and their bravery. So just to bring you up to date on what the latest is, the former Hollywood movie producer Harvey Weinstein has been found guilty of 2 counts in his sexual assault trial. He's been convicted of third-degree rape and a criminal sexual act in the first degree. The 67-year-old, though, has been acquitted of the most serious charges against him of predatory sexual assault and first-degree rape. But he faces a jail term of something between 5 and 25 years, potentially. Plenty more on BBC World News. Do stay with us.